My name is Heather Wheelaker, and I'm here with my colleague, Karen Young, and both of us work in the Economic and Environmental Sustainability branch with the city. We're joined by another colleague from our same unit, Lisa Dockman, who is going to deliver the content of today's session, along with Daryl Kaminsky, who Lisa will introduce shortly. As well, two solar technical advisors from Incline Solutions are joining us to help with responding to any questions that may arise during today's session. Welcome and thank you, Akeem Alad and Isaiah Womack. And just a note, this session will be recorded and we're only recording the speaking and the presentation slides. Next slide, please. At this time, I wish to acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of Treaty 6 territory. We do this to create awareness and to remind ourselves that we are all treaty members, no matter where we are from or what language we speak. I did not grow up on Treaty 6 territory, but I have a strong sense of belonging because of the welcoming environment created here. As treaty members, each of us shares responsibility for creating and nurturing an inclusive and respectful community. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's presenter. Lisa Dockman is a project manager who develops and implements programs for homeowners that move us closer to reaching the goals of Edmonton's community and energy transition strategy. One of the programs that Lisa oversees and will touch on during this session is the City of Edmonton's Solar Rebate Program. And Lisa is going to be introducing her co-presenter, Daryl Kaminsky from Solar Alberta too. So with that, please welcome my colleague, Lisa Dockman. Lisa.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, or I guess good afternoon by a few minutes. Good. Thank you, Heather, for the introduction and for organizing this event. And thanks everybody for joining us for this really important conversation and webinar, Lunch and Learn. Yeah, so I will get us kicked off with just a little bit of context guiding this work at the City of Edmonton, and then I'll hand it over to my colleague Daryl Kaminsky, who's the president of Solar Alberta. Solar Alberta, as many of you may know, is just a really great organization working in this space, and we're so grateful that he's able to share his insights and provide us sort of everything we need to know about solar power in Alberta. So I'll hand it over to him at one point here. And then after his presentation, I will provide some details on a few rebate programs that exist for Edmontonians to help make the switch more accessible to you. And then, as Heather described, we have two colleagues, Akeem and Isaiah from Incline. Incline is the program administrator that the City of Edmonton has contracted to deliver our solar rebate program. So they will be helping answer any questions you may have over the course of the session, and then also, of course, at the end. So a big thanks to them for their expertise. So our efforts towards encouraging solar power on homes and buildings in Edmonton are part of the implementation of Edmonton's community energy transition strategy. So this is essentially a roadmap of how Edmonton plans to achieve a low carbon sustainable energy future and really take advantage of this transition to a green economy that's happening all around us. So this plan was originally approved by City Council in 2015, and it has these three major targets by 2035. So a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, a savings in energy, and then also a local generation target of 10%. So as you can see, solar power really hits at least two, if not all three of these components of our work in the community, and especially that 10% of local energy generation. Solar is just absolutely such a great way of achieving that 10%. Of course, Daryl will get into more of the benefits around that. But as many of you may know, in 2019, City Council declared a climate emergency and at the same time asked administration to update the energy transition strategy to align with the Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement is the IPCC's, or Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is guided by those IPCC scientists and their recommendation that to avoid the most catastrophic parts of climate change and impacts of it, really, we globally need to stay below an average increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius. So that's what's guided this overarching number and the city's commitment to that level of ambition. And actually, yesterday, the updated energy transition strategy was approved by executive committee to go to full council on April 19th, next week. So we are very close to seeing the outcome of that conversation, and encourage you to tune in if you're interested. So supplementary to the energy transition strategy, this work is also integral to the city plan. So in late 2019, council passed the new city plan, which really is it's the municipal development plan, it's the transportation master plan. It has this real important position as a strategic guiding document for the organization and the community. But it has 5 big moves that are meant to guide how we grow to an estimated 2 million people in Edmonton. One of them is known as a big city move, or greener as we grow. And you'll see these 3 targets within that big city move. So there's an urban trees target, but then a total community-wide carbon budget of 135 megatons and a net per person GHG emissions of 0. So these are by 2050. But as you can see, they're very, very ambitious and are in alignment with that Paris Agreement. So we already have a lot of support and strategic direction to advance this solar in the community. So as the community energy transition strategy is implemented, we have all of the sources of GHG emissions and of energy consumption in the city in mind, and have targeted actions and programs that look at reducing in all of these areas. So if you were to go to Change for Climate, you'd see programs related to commercial buildings, residential, which are those that I lead, and then also transportation related emissions. And then one last slide before I hand it over to Daryl, because I think this is an interesting one. It's a slightly different story than the last I just showed. So if you look at the left-hand side here, our total energy consumption by energy type, about 16% is from electricity. Now, granted, this is in 2012. I know we do have newer numbers than this now, but have to integrate those into this shortly. But 16% of our energy consumption was electricity. But given the carbon intensity of our grid in Alberta, in 2012, that resulted in almost 40% of our GHG emissions. So really the carbon intensity of our electricity is meaning that when we make changes to our homes and buildings that result in electricity savings, it has a dramatic impact on our carbon footprint as Edmontonians. So really an important thing to focus on. And I know since 2012, our grid has changed dramatically in Edmonton, at least, more than 20% cleaner than it was back then with the sort of phase out of coal. But I still do think that this is an important message to kick us off. When you compare Alberta to places like BC or Ontario, their grids are just dramatically different with the presence of hydroelectricity, for example. And even in Alberta, when we do decarbonize, we're replacing coal with natural gas. So the impact of solar, I think, will always have a really important role as it generates green electricity in that local context. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing more from Daryl, who I will hand it over to.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm just having a little technical difficulty here. I hope you can see my screen. Good. Okay, so the Solar Alberta group is also known as the Solar Energy Society of Alberta. We've been around for a while now, 30 years this year, I'm happy to say. And we are a group of volunteers that carry the torch of solar energy in Alberta, I like to think. Our mission is to advance community collaboration and understanding around Alberta's renewable energy resources, all of them, not just solar, and energy efficiency, which in my opinion comes first. When you reduce energy, then you can change to a new, cleaner source. more cost effectively. So we have a solar directory that I'm going to loop back to later on, but I wanted to put it out there that this is a one-stop shopping for checking out who is doing what in solar energy in Alberta. And that's going to come in handy with a certain program that has an incentive to install solar in Edmonton. I had a solar cooker. This is what kids in school learn. You can have an insulated cardboard box with tin foil and a clear coating to let the sun in, and it's enough to bake cookies. But there's industrial sized versions of that for making meals for entire villages in places like India. There's a solar thermal on the wall of a home, and that cat is not for scale. So thermal is just the sun hitting something, heating up the air or fluid, and then bringing it into the building. What we want to talk about is the next one. Please advance. Thank you. Hey, there it is. There's on somebody's acreage a solar array on a rack. It looks like they have decided to mount theirs on sturdy wood beams, and that is a good way to do solar if you have a lot of space. You can tilt it to the ideal angle. When it all works, it seems like magic. To me, it still does. When I was a kid, I saw solar and I never stopped thinking about how, really? Electricity is coming from the sun? Yeah, photons into electrons. That's really all it is that it boils down to. It's a little more complex than that, but I won't go into the science of it just right now. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits of going solar? Okay, if you're talking about a residential installation, many. Reducing your environmental impact from the grid. Alberta does have still a little bit of a carbon intensive grid. There's still coal, natural gas, and it's actually one of the dirtiest grids in Canada. So solar does offset a lot of that and make your energy consumption a lot greener. Yes, you will save money. Some people are still concerned that that's not true. It is true. 12 to 15 years payback, depending on the size of your system and the cost to install it. But the lifespan is 25 to 30 years. And I say in that range because the warranties go to 25 years to 30 years, but there's evidence that they are actually still going after that time. Some of the early solar installs are still running, is still producing energy. Increasing the resale value of your home. Yes, it's desirable to have solar energy on homes. There's a market for that. They will pay a premium. And you can actually reduce your reliance on the energy grid. Though you're connected to it, you can have a battery backup, which allows you to capture more of your solar energy and use it for what you like, not exporting it all to the grid for your neighbors. But you could also charge an electric car. We can get into that more if we have time. We'll advance the next slide, please. So does it make sense in this region, Edmonton? Yes, as has been said many times, we get more solar electricity than Germany, which has a lot of solar installations. And yes, you do get the energy credit if you put any excess production onto the grid. That's called export. If you export any solar to the grid, your neighbors get to use it. You do get credited on your bill. You can make arrangements with independent retailers, by the way, to get more than some other retailers. I won't talk about shopping the retailers, but this is a deregulated market in Alberta, and you can choose your own energy retailer. They may give you a bounty for solar energy exported. Just saying. So yes, there's another plug for the electric vehicle at the end there. You could use it to charge your electric car. Next, please. So what's it all about component-wise? Those modules that we see on the roof, those are DC or battery type. You know, you could charge a battery almost directly with direct current modules, but you need a little bit of electronics in the way to plug it into the grid. So some cables are going to bring it into an inverter, an alternating current inverter. So it's DC to AC conversion. And you're going to because electrons aren't so visible, you're going to watch it on a web-based production interface. And by production, I mean generation of electricity is going to be viewed, could be minute by minute, or at least hour by hour. And many of these can be gathered together into, if you're in a townhome and such, you could have each townhomes gathered into a master interface to see how much the entire complex is making. Next slide, please. What is the cost of all this? Yes, we get that cost question a lot. I've thrown up some industry averages from some of my colleagues on the board of directors. And they're saying that across Alberta, this is Alberta-wide, not just Edmonton, $2 to $2.75 a watt. And typical size, 5,000 to 7,000 watts, and cost somewhere around $10,000 to $15,000. Now, these are all Alberta-wide kind of ranges. And I've been informed by a colleague here that the price for Edmonton under the program, they've gathered some data, and they're saying it's about $2.33 a watt. And the average size is actually 8,000 watts or 8 kilowatts. That's pretty big. And I think it might be because the incentive is helping them to afford a slightly larger installation than they might have otherwise. Next slide, please. So yes, our formal name is Solar Energy Society of Alberta. Our handle is Solar Alberta. And when we are all able to, again, we look forward to having solar drinks together once again, where we can all just chat about whatever renewable and efficiency stuff you're interested in. And with that, yes, I'll formally hand it back.
Now that we have some of that context around the how solar panels work and some of the benefits, I did want to share a little bit about programs available to Edmontonians, Residential Solar Rebate Program and HERA, the Home Energy Retrofit Accelerator. So just before I get into the details of the solar rebate program, I did think I'd mention briefly how solar has been doing in Edmonton. So this is actually a screenshot of some Tableau visualizations that we have on our website, and there's a link here that we can share to the actual page. But I do think that these are very telling. So if you look at, for example, the top graph, and I do apologize, it's quite small text, but the top graph is the total connected capacity in Edmonton over time. And so in 2021, there was over 1,900 kilowatts of installed capacity in Edmonton. And if you look back 10 years, in 2011, that was only 142. So some pretty dramatic growth over the last 10 years within Edmonton city limits. The second here is the total solar sites that are connected. So in 2020, we have the total number from 2020 here. That was 513. Whereas if you look 10 years ago in 2010, it was only 15. So while I think overall the total is still like a fairly small proportion of our electricity comes from solar within Edmonton, I do think it's pretty fascinating to see the rate of growth and the interest that's really spiked in our community. So since our rebate program launched in July 2019, 265 solar installations have received funding and have resulted in that 1.9, I guess, 1,900 kilowatts of installed capacity. And then solar power provided enough electricity in 2019 to meet 0.123% of Edmonton's total needs, which is up is up from 2018, but in comparison is significantly lower than the 10% goal in the community energy transition strategy. So I think just demonstrates that while there's some great growth, there's so much more opportunity to be able to support solar installations in the community to achieve our climate resilience goals. So I'm really grateful that Daryl described sort of a few different kinds of solar because our solar rebate program does rebate specific type, and that's the solar photovoltaic or PV. So these are the panels that you'll see in this picture here on a garage or on a roof, for example, and that they're electricity, not the solar thermal or battery storage. Daryl did a great job talking about the components. I did just think I would mention that systems must be compatible with the Government of Alberta's microgeneration regulation to be eligible for this rebate. So we do welcome questions on that, but I think essentially there's lots of details online, but I think a big component of that is that it needs to be grid connected, and that it also needs to, there's a limit to the amount you can install. No matter how big your roof, this regulation limits the size of your system to close to your consumption, so that people aren't, generating a whole lot more than they may be using in their home. And then that grid connected is a really interesting one because, as Daryl mentioned, although your total capacity needs to be close to your consumption, in Edmonton, given our sort of climate patterns, you do tend to overproduce in the summer and sometimes shoulder seasons, and then underproduce in the winter months. So while there's really great potential year round, on those times when you're overproducing, you're then feeding back into the grid through a bidirectional meter, and then of course getting those credits as Daryl described for that work. So the residential solar rebate program provides 40 cents per installed watt for existing homes and buildings, and then 30 cents per watt for new homes and buildings. And we're finding that the price is a little bit less expensive for the new homes and buildings, and that's sort of why both of these amounts cover 15% of the total system costs. So the eligibility is residential homes, single family, multifamily, secondary suites, whether that be a garage suite or a garden suite, rooftop of your home or a garage. Both systems are welcome. However, expansions are not allowed to existing systems. It's a two-part application with a pre and post install, and Akeem and Isaiah can answer all kinds of questions about that. But the funds are held if you have an approved pre-install application. Those funds are held for 9 months for you to complete your system, and either the homeowner or the installer can apply on the homeowner's behalf, depending on your preference. You do need to include a contractor, that you need to choose a contractor that is either on the Solar Alberta or CanREA list, and homes.changeforclimate.ca is where you'll find links to all of that. And I do encourage you to review the detailed terms and conditions as well if you're interested. So I already described those rebate amounts, but I did want to share a couple maximums. So as of April 7th, so these are some changes that we very recently made. The rebate cap is $4,000 per dwelling, or 40% of the system costs, whichever is lower. So you get that 30 or 40 cent rebate per watt to one of those maximums, and that is per dwelling. So if you have, a secondary suite in your basement and a garage suite, that would be 3 dwellings in your single family home, or of course, multifamily townhouses, condos, apartments. And then there is a maximum of $50,000 in rebates per calendar year per property owner or builder. So that's another significant one to keep in mind. And then just to help ensure that there's an equal weighting to existing and new builds, there is a limit of 50% of the annual program incentive budget going to new construction projects. Now, we do strongly encourage Edmontonians to reach out to a qualified solar installer to get some quotes and get some insight into the feasibility and the design of a solar system on your home or garage. But we have partnered with MyHeat to help sort of provide kind of an entry point for folks that maybe aren't ready to contact an installer yet, or are just interested to see what their potential might be. I'd encourage you to check out solar.myheat.ca. This is actually my house here. You'll see the person that we bought my home from has a beautiful garden that we are not going to be able to live up to this summer. But you'll see that my address has 1,246 hours of usable sunlight a year and 80 square meters of usable roof space. So it doesn't have the best solar potential in Edmonton. You'll see it's like maybe not as yellow as maybe some of the buildings around, but despite that, there is still really great solar potential for my home. And if you scroll further down after you've entered your home's address, you can also enter your electricity bill, and it tells you the amount of panels and the size system that might be appropriate, sort of, a rough estimate based on some localized assumptions. And it also tells you some of the benefits that you might anticipate, environmental, but also financial return on investment for that kind of a system. And then just briefly, because I do know our focus today is on the solar program, there is an element of the Home Energy Retrofit Accelerator that is relevant to you folks that might be interested in solar. So first of all, what is HERA? So this is the Home Energy Retrofit Accelerator. It's a residential energy efficiency incentive program that helps facilitate home renovations that result in carbon emissions reductions, energy savings, and simultaneously help support the thriving renovation and building industry in Edmonton by stimulating this kind of renovation activity. So HERA is available to all Edmontonians, homeowners through this process here. But essentially what it's doing is providing rebates for things like insulation, windows, water and space heating equipment. And then also we're trying to encourage folks to, undergo multiple measures and multiple upgrades. And so there's a bonus available for more significant retrofits. So those who are interested in HERA, the process is to complete an EnerGuide home energy evaluation, for which there's a $350 rebate for. They then enroll in the program with that label, upgrade their home, in a way that's compatible with the eligibility criteria for all the different equipment that's eligible for the program, apply for rebates, and then you can do a post-renovation evaluation if you'd like. So I went through this program in detail in another session on March 30th that is going to be very soon posted on this link here, the Lunchbox page. So I do encourage you to go watch that. But I did just want to highlight that we have a rebate within HERA specific as a bonus for folks that renovate their home to net zero. And by this, I mean a home that produces enough energy to meet all of its energy needs on an annual basis. So for example, you'll see a photo of that transformation in the bottom there. But I do want to bring this up because in addition to that solar rebate program that I described, and in addition to any home energy efficiency upgrades you might make, this $10,000 rebate is for Edmontonians that demonstrate an EnerGuide label of 0. And really, to be at a state of net zero, you have to, for the most part, have solar power on your rooftop. So really, this is an there's added value here to Edmontonians considering going solar. So expenses related with your materials, but also professional services from these installations are eligible. Is stackable, as I mentioned, with other programs, but also is an addition to the product-specific HERA rebates. And then you can get credit in this rebate for work that's taken place really anytime, as long as that work took place between a pre and post EnerGuide evaluation. So if you've had an EnerGuide for a number of years, then work that's taken place to upgrade your home would be eligible. So this is the program page for HERA. I would encourage you to go take a peek if you're interested. And then the last two mentions I'd make, as you may have heard, and so apologies if you have, but we are also anticipating the Greener Homes program to be announced this spring, so sometime shortly here. And it is the federal government's, it's part of kind of their green recovery, and it's up to 1 million free EnerGuide assessments and up to 700,000 grants for $5,000 per homeowner. Now, the materials so far for this program talk about energy efficiency, but they also mention renewables. So really, that's really great alignment between those of you that are considering solar, the Edmonton program, and also this federal one that we expect will be available very soon. And then lastly, some of you may have heard about this financing tool, CEAP, the Clean Energy Improvement Program, that the City of Edmonton is working on a pilot that I'm certain you'll hear a lot more about in future. But essentially, I wanted to mention it because while it's on the horizon and do anticipate, in the, potentially, I think it's Q3 this year, we might see this program available to Edmontonians. It's a really neat model. So it's based on PACE as a model, the Property Assessed Clean Energy, which is a financing tool that is a low-cost, long-term funding for renewables, but also energy efficiency to homes and buildings. So it's really, really quite important because it pays for 100% of the project costs through that financing, but then is repaid over the lifetime of the product via the property taxes of that home. So this is, I think, the most innovative and important part of this as a financing tool is many homeowners don't own their home for 20 or 25 years. So solar can be a really challenging investment given some of those longer term returns. And what this does is really provide an alternative to that, because the idea being that the benefit stays with the home, the solar panels stay with the home upon sale, as does the repayment of that financing through the municipal property taxes. So there is a link there as well for more information, but also feel free to ask some questions. And just the program administrator's contact information here, as well as my own.
Thank you again to our presenters, Lisa Dockman with the City of Edmonton and Daryl Kaminsky with Solar Alberta for sharing your time and your expertise with us. And thank you to the solar advisors, Akeem Alaid and Isaiah Womack with Incline Solutions for helping to respond to questions, and to my colleague Karen Young for handling all of the logistical pieces to make this happen and for taking over at the start of the session. And to you, our audience, I hope that we will see you again at an upcoming session. Have a terrific afternoon.